Tribe, on Homecoming and Belonging by Sebastian Junger. Picture this. You've just graduated college, and the world feels enormous and slightly terrifying. You decide to hitchhike across America to find yourself. Because apparently, that's what people do when they're young and restless. So there you are, standing on a highway ramp outside Gillette, Wyoming, on a cold October morning. Semi-trucks blast past you, and you're starting to wonder if this was maybe not your best idea. Then you notice someone walking toward you from town. He's disheveled, wearing a greasy union suit, carrying a black lunchbox. Every alarm bell in your head starts ringing. This is literally the scenario your parents warned you about. He stops right in front of you, sizes you up, and asks, "How much food do you got?" Naturally, you lie. You tell him you've only got a little cheese, convinced he's about to rob you. But he just shakes his head and says, "You can't get to California on just a little cheese. You need more than that." Then he does something that completely blindsides you. He tells you he lives in a broken-down car and didn't get work at the coal mine that day. "So I won't be needing this," he says, opening his lunchbox. Inside, a bologna sandwich, an apple, and a bag of chips. He hands it all to you. "He saw you from town," he explains, "and walked all the way out to the highway just to make sure you were okay." Wait, what? Why would a man with literally nothing give away his only meal to a complete stranger? This moment haunted author and legendary war correspondent Sebastian Junger for the rest of his life. And it's the mystery he tackles in his powerful book, Tribe. Junger has spent his career in the world's most dangerous places, witnessing not just the brutality of war, but the incredible bonds that form when everything falls apart. He discovered something ancient awakening in people when society collapses. What he found is a startling truth about human happiness. We're tribal animals hardwired for loyalty, community, and sacrifice. And our safe, comfortable modern world, despite all its amazing conveniences, is starving us of the very thing we need most to feel truly alive. By the end of our journey today, you'll understand this hidden human need. You'll see why hardship can sometimes feel better than comfort, why disasters can actually bring out the best in us, and why that ache of loneliness you might feel isn't a personal failing. It's a signal that your tribe is missing, and you'll learn why finding it or building it might be the most important thing you ever do. The answer to why that man in Wyoming shared his last meal begins hundreds of years ago, on the frontier of colonial America. Two worlds were colliding: structured, individualistic European society and the communal, egalitarian tribal societies of Native Americans. And something really weird kept happening. Europeans kept running away to join the Indians, but Indians almost never ran away to join the Europeans. Benjamin Franklin wrote about this in 1753, completely baffled. He noticed that when white people were captured by Indian tribes, even if they were later rescued and brought back to their own people, they'd escape back into the woods at the first opportunity. But when Indian children were raised in white society and learned the language and customs, the moment they visited their relatives, there was no convincing them to return to colonial life. The traffic was always one way, from the civilized to the savage. Why? It wasn't because tribal life was easy. It was filled with hardship and brutal warfare. But it offered something Western society had started losing. In a tribe, your personal property was limited to what you could carry, which made massive wealth inequality nearly impossible. Status wasn't inherited. You earned it through courage and skill. Decisions were often made by consensus, not by some distant ruler. And people felt a deep sense of belonging and responsibility for one another. Women, particularly, had way more autonomy and freedom than their counterparts in uptight colonial society. As one colonial woman who chose tribal life explained, "Here I have no master. I am the equal of all the women in the tribe. I shall marry if I wish, and be unmarried again when I wish. Is there a single woman as independent as I in your cities?" This was the magnetic pull of the tribe: deep connection, shared purpose, and personal freedom. A life where you were fundamentally necessary to the people around you, and they were necessary to you. The story of Colonel Henri Bouquet in the 1760s makes this heartbreakingly clear. After a brutal frontier war, he demanded that Indian tribes return all their white captives. Over the next few weeks, about 200 people were brought in. The reunions were filled with confusion and grief. Children screamed as they were pulled from the arms of their Indian parents and handed to biological families they didn't remember. Young women who were now married to Indian men stood reluctantly before their former lives. The Indians themselves were devastated to give them up. As Bouquet's army marched away, many followed for days, hunting game to feed their adopted family members, trying to delay the final goodbye. Some of the white captives, even adults, had to be physically restrained to prevent them from running back to the tribes. They didn't feel rescued, they felt like prisoners all over again. They were leaving a world where they belonged, to return to a world that was becoming increasingly wealthy, safe, and lonely. So what did we build instead of the tribe, and what did it cost us? Sebastian Junger argues that with agriculture and then industrialization, two fundamental things changed about being human. First, the ability to accumulate vast personal property meant people could make increasingly individualistic choices, which slowly eroded the need for group effort. Second, as society modernized, people could live completely independently from any community. For the first time in history, you could go through your entire life surrounded by people yet only ever encounter strangers. We are literally the first humans to ever live this way, and the evidence that it's messing us up is overwhelming. Junger points to mountains of research, showing that as societies become more affluent, their rates of depression, anxiety, and suicide go up, not down. One global World Health Organization study found that people in wealthy countries suffer from depression at up to 8 times the rate of people in poor countries. The mechanism is tragically simple. Poor people are often forced to share their time and resources to survive. This creates closer, more interdependent communities. Sure, it comes with its own stresses, but it's much closer to our evolutionary blueprint. A financially independent person who's never had to ask for help is living a life that's completely alien to the million-year history of our species. Financial independence can lead to social isolation, and social isolation is a direct path to depression. This alienation starts at birth. In hunter-gatherer societies, infants are held or carried by their mothers up to 90% of the time. In modern America, that number can drop as low as 16%. We're one of the only societies in history to make our children sleep alone in separate rooms. The psychological justification is to make them self-soothing, but this runs completely contrary to our primate evolution. For an infant, being left alone in a dark room is instinctively terrifying, a signal of profound danger. This modern world we've built, for all its miracles of medicine and technology, is engineered for isolation, and it has perfected the art of making people feel unnecessary. If our modern world is the disease, what's the antidote? The answer is both shocking and deeply revealing. The antidote, it seems, is catastrophe. Think about what happens when a natural disaster strikes, an earthquake, hurricane, or flood. The news focuses on looting and chaos. But social scientists who study these events have found the exact opposite. Overwhelmingly, communities struck by disaster become more just, more equal, and more cooperative. Social bonds are instantly reinforced. Suddenly, class differences evaporate. Your wealth becomes irrelevant. Your race is overlooked. You're judged simply by what you're willing to do for the group. As one survivor of a devastating Italian earthquake wrote, "The disaster achieves what the law promises, but does not in practice maintain the equality of all men." Disasters, Junger proposes, create a community of sufferers, a temporary return to the tribal way of life our brains are wired for. They thrust us back into an ancient organic way of relating to each other, and this experience is so gratifying that people often remember disasters more fondly than weddings or tropical vacations. The most powerful example, the London Blitz during World War II. The British government expected German bombing raids to cause mass hysteria. They worried the working class would descend into chaos, that society itself would crumble. They couldn't have been more wrong. For 57 consecutive nights, German bombers pounded London, killing hundreds at a time. And faced with this horror, the city didn't collapse. It unified. People from all walks of life huddled together in bomb shelters, policing themselves, sharing resources, demonstrating incredible resilience. Here's the most startling part. Psychiatric hospital admissions dropped. Doctors watched in amazement as long-standing patients saw their anxiety and depression symptoms subside. Suicide rates fell. As one psychiatrist remarked, chronic neurotics of peacetime now drive ambulances. Even German cities that were bombed hardest, like Dresden, showed the highest civilian morale. The shared struggle, the sense of common purpose, was powerful medicine against the alienation of modern life. Junger experienced this firsthand, covering the siege of Sarajevo in the 1990s. The city was apocalyptic. Snipers picked off civilians in the street. Buildings were gutted shells. No electricity, little food, constant danger. Yet 20 years later, when he returned, people talked with strange nostalgia about those terrible days. They didn't miss the violence or fear. They missed who they were back then. They missed the feeling of absolute community. One survivor, journalist Nidzara Amatasevich, shared her experience. As a teenager, she and her friends lived communally in a basement bomb shelter. The boys would fight on the front lines, then return to join the girls. They shared everything: food, music, stories, fear, and love. The love that we shared was enormous, she said. When she was evacuated to safety in Italy, the loneliness was unbearable. She felt so disconnected that she eventually risked her life to sneak back into the besieged city. "I missed being that close to people," she explained. "I missed being loved in that way." Then she told Junger something that cuts to the very heart of his book. The world we are living in, and the peace that we have, is very messed up if somebody is missing war, and many people do. Her conclusion was profound. The war makes you an animal. We were animals. It's insane, but that's the basic human instinct, to help another human being who is sitting or standing or lying close to you. This brings us to the climax of Junger's argument, the experience of the modern soldier. If disaster and war can create such a powerful sense of tribe, what happens when a warrior has to leave that tribe and return to our disconnected modern world? Junger begins this section with his own experience. After a harrowing assignment in Afghanistan, he returned to New York City. A few months later, standing on a crowded subway platform, he was suddenly gripped by a terrifying panic attack. The world felt overwhelming, threatening. He was more scared than he'd ever been in a war zone. He later learned this was classic post-traumatic stress disorder. From an evolutionary perspective, post-traumatic stress disorder is a perfectly normal response to life-threatening events. Vigilance, light sleep, nightmares, anger, and depression are all survival mechanisms. Anger keeps you ready to fight. Depression keeps you from taking more risks. The disorder isn't the initial reaction. It's when that reaction fails to subside, when you can't recover. And Junger argues that for modern soldiers, the biggest obstacle to recovery isn't just the trauma of combat, it's the trauma of coming home. Imagine being part of a platoon. It's the ultimate tribe. For months you live, eat, sleep, and fight alongside a small group of people. You're closer to them than your own family. You trust them with your life, and they trust you with theirs. You're bound by shared purpose and loyalty, so profound, you die for the person next to you without hesitation. You're never alone. You're profoundly necessary. Then you board a plane, and within hours, you're dropped back into a society where you're mostly a stranger. You go from the intense, interdependent world of the platoon to the anonymous, individualistic world of suburban America, a world where people are divided by politics, race, and class, where your neighbors barely know your name, where personal gain almost completely eclipses the collective good. Vietnam veteran Gregory Gomez, an Apache Indian, described this disconnect perfectly. "I talked to my mom only one time from Mars. That's what it feels like. You're calling home from another planet, trying to explain a reality no one around you can possibly understand. This is why so many veterans miss the war." It's an awkward truth, but it appears in accounts from soldiers across centuries. They don't miss the violence. They miss the brotherhood. They miss belonging to something larger than themselves. World War II veteran Winstruck explained, "We were in a tribal sort of situation, where we could help each other without fear. For the first time in their lives, they were not living in a competitive society. It was the absence of competition and boundaries and all those phony standards that created the thing I loved about the Army. The problem isn't just the war, it's the re-entry, and the society they're re-entering is, in many ways, fundamentally unhealthy." Junger points out that Israel, a modern country in intermittent war for decades, has one of the lowest rates of post-traumatic stress disorder in the world, as low as 1% by some measures. Why? Two key reasons. First, military service is mandatory and widespread, so veterans return to a society where their experience is broadly understood. Second, the combat is close to home. The public isn't disconnected from the war, they feel its reality. This creates what's called shared public meaning, a context for the soldiers, sacrifice that the entire nation acknowledges. In America, we offer veterans token gestures. We thank them for their service, let them board planes first, give them discounts. But Junger argues these acts can actually deepen the chasm between military and civilian life, highlighting that a tiny fraction of the population bears the war's burden, while the vast majority does not. This leads Junger to his final, damning critique of modern society. What kind of tribe are our soldiers actually coming home to? It is, he concludes, a nation that has become dangerously detribalized, increasingly at war with itself. He presents a stark comparison to make his point: Sergeant Bo Bergdahl versus the architects of the 2008 financial collapse. When Bo Bergdahl walked off his post in Afghanistan, he betrayed his platoon, his tribe. The collective outrage in America was immense. Many called for him to be tried for treason. His act was seen as a profound violation of the warrior's code of loyalty. But in that same period, a small group of powerful bankers on Wall Street committed acts of breathtaking selfishness. Through fraudulent and reckless practices, they triggered a global financial crisis that cost the American economy an estimated $14 trillion. Almost 9 million people lost their jobs. 5 million families lost their homes. The ensuing recession is estimated to have caused nearly 5,000 additional suicides in the United States alone, a death toll approaching that of the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan combined. This was betrayal of the national tribe on an epic scale, yet there was no comparable outrage. Not a single high-level executive was jailed. Many received massive year-end bonuses, paid for with taxpayer bailout money. A society that heaps scorn on a lone soldier for disloyalty while rewarding powerful men for causing vastly more harm is a society with a broken moral compass. It no longer understands the basic contract of the tribe, that we're all in this together. This internal conflict shows up in our political discourse, which Junger sees as a, quote, dangerous waste of time. He argues that the eternal debate between conservatives and liberals is a fight between two ancient and equally essential human impulses. The conservative concern about fairness and freeloaders comes from our deep evolutionary need to ensure everyone in the group pulls their weight. The liberal concern for compassion and caring for the vulnerable comes from the equally ancient impulse that allowed our species to thrive. Both are right. Both are necessary. But we've turned them into weapons to attack one another. We live in a society where people speak of their fellow citizens with contempt once reserved for wartime enemies. This, Junger says, is the ultimate act of disaffiliation. It's the slow, corrosive destruction of the tribe from within. As we reach the end of our journey through Tribe, the central message lands with the force of a truth we've always known, but couldn't quite name. We're tribal animals living in a non-tribal world, and this fundamental mismatch is the source of so much modern suffering. The gnawing loneliness, the sense of purposelessness, the quiet desperation that can creep in even when you have everything you need. This isn't personal failure. It's the cry of our evolutionary soul, longing for the connection, purpose, and mutual reliance that defined our existence for nearly all of human history. Sebastian Junger's great gift in this book is holding a mirror up to our society and showing us what we've lost. We've traded community for comfort, interdependence for independence, and collective good for personal gain. While this has brought unprecedented safety and wealth, it has come at a terrible psychological cost. We have everything we could ever want, but we've forgotten what we desperately need. So what do? How do we begin reclaiming this essential part of our humanity in a world that seems designed to keep us apart? Junger doesn't offer a simple 5-step plan because the solution isn't a life hack. It's a fundamental shift in how we choose to live. But the book leaves us with a clear direction. First, we must find our local tribe. Rebuilding national unity can feel impossible, but we can start smaller. Your tribe might be your neighborhood, your sports team, your volunteer group, or your colleagues. The question is, who are the people you can truly rely on in a crisis? And more importantly, who can rely on you? It's about consciously building networks of mutual support, moving from transactional relationships to ones of genuine care and responsibility. Second, we must practice what Junger calls pro-social behavior. This brings us back to the man in Gillette and the Cree hunter in the book's postscript, who, when asked why he gave away his food to strangers, replied, "Suppose now, not to give them." Just dead inside. The ultimate antidote to modern alienation is the selfless act. This week, try performing one small, generous act for a stranger, not for thanks or recognition, but simply as a quiet rebellion against the ethos of every man for himself. It's in giving that we receive the feeling of connection we crave. Finally, for those of us who are civilians, we must find ways to bridge the gap with those who have served. Instead of offering a hollow, "Thank you for your service," we can seek opportunities to truly listen. We can attend community events where veterans share their stories, or simply create a safe space for the veterans in our own lives to speak their truth without judgment. The burden of war shouldn't belong only to the warrior. It belongs to the society that sent them. Sharing that burden is one of the most powerful ways to begin healing the tribe. Ultimately, tribe is a call to courage. It's a call to choose community over comfort, connection over consumption, and sacrifice over selfishness. Building a tribe in the modern world is a quiet, radical act. It may be the most important work of our time, because, as Junger so powerfully reminds us, our survival, both as individuals and as a species, has always depended on it. That brings us to the end of our journey through Tribe by Sebastian Junger. We've walked through some profound and challenging ideas today, but a summary is like looking at a map of a beautiful country. I can show you the landmarks, but I can't give you the feeling of the sun on your skin or the scent of the air. The real power of this book is in the stories, the reflections, and the quiet moments where Junger's words connect with your own experience. This summary is your map. If you feel the pull to explore this territory for yourself, to truly understand the ache for belonging that lives inside all of us, then I urge you to get a copy. Reading it isn't just an intellectual exercise, it's an emotional homecoming. You can find a link to the book in the description below. And finally, if this exploration has sparked something in you, please take a moment to hit that subscribe button and give this video a like. It tells us we're on the right track, and it ensures you won't miss our next deep dive into another world-changing book here on Billionaire's Bookshelf. Thank you for joining me. Let's keep learning and growing together.